Welcome everyone to this IPPR webinar on the role of smart technology in tackling the climate crisis. Thanks very much for joining us today. My name is Luke Murphy. I'm the Associate Director for the Energy, Climate, Housing and Infrastructure team at IPPR, and we're very pleased to be hosting this webinar today on the role of smart technology in reaching net zero, together with support from Vodafone. I'm just going to set out a little bit about IPPR's work as we begin, give an overview of what we're going to be discussing today, and then introduce our absolutely fantastic speakers that we've got today to discuss this issue. Firstly, a little bit about IPPR's work. IPPR has a large portfolio of work focused on tackling the climate and nature crises. Our biggest piece of work, or our main programme, is the Environmental Justice Commission, which is focused on how we can tackle the climate crisis, restore nature, but do so in an economically and socially just way, and also ensure that we put people at the heart of this agenda. But today we're going to be focusing on primarily on the role of smart technology and digital innovation. Now, I think we all know, and many of you will know, I'm sure we've got a very informed audience today, that decarbonising the economy will require sweeping policy action across all parts of our life, from how we generate electricity, how we travel, work and heat our buildings. But we wanted to use the opportunity of this event today to look at how digital technology might help us achieve those goals, and in particular our net zero targets. So for instance, discussing how embracing innovative new technologies such as 5G and the Internet of Things might help us do the things that we need to do to meet these goals, including transforming the way that we work, travel and live, and to reduce our energy consumption and help us tackle the climate crisis. A few notes on housekeeping. We've got 4 excellent speakers with us today, and I'm going to be introducing them in just 1 second. They're going to make some short opening remarks, around 5 to 7 minutes, and then we're going to come back to audience questions. If you would like to ask a question of our panel, please do add your question into the Q&A function. You're more than welcome to discuss and debate issues within the chat, but if you would like to put a question to our panel, please do consider putting your question in the Q&A function. And as you can see in the chat already, please do think about tweeting along to the webinar, and the Twitter handles of our speakers today are in the chat at the moment. But I'd like to introduce our fantastic speakers. First up, we're going to have Andrew Griffith MP, who's the Net Zero Business Champion. Andrew was appointed as the UK's Net Zero Business Champion in November 2020 to work closely, specifically with the Business Secretary and the COP26 President, to support the country's business community to make credible plans to net zero by 2050 or earlier, and also to showcase the UK's place as a global leader in tackling climate change. He's joined by Scott Petty, who is the Chief Technology Officer at Vodafone. And as Chief Technology Officer, Scott is responsible for defining and implementing Vodafone's technology strategy, and also driving thinking across topics such as artificial intelligence, 5G and full fibre broadband. We're also joined by Katerina, who is the Head of Climate Policy at Green Alliance. As the Head of Climate Policy, she's leading Green Alliance's work on the low carbon future theme strand of their work. And last but not least, we've got Prad Pandit, who is the Managing Director of Sustainability and Energy Services at Mighty. Prad has over 20 years experience in the engineering and technology sector, working in a number of roles ranging from new business development to operations. But first up, I'm going to hand over to Andrew, who's going to give us his opening thoughts on this topic around the role of smart technology in addressing the climate crisis. Andrew.
Thank you, Luke, and thank you to the Institute for Public Policy Research for inviting me to join today's really important conversation. We'll get on in a minute because I'm keen to hear as much from people like Scott and Pandit, who are the problem solvers in this big challenge. But by way of a scene setter, I wanted to explain a tiny bit about my role, but also the context in which we meet because this is a big year, the biggest ever year for climate, for our planet, and everybody on this call today is absolutely central to that agenda. Now, obviously, it would be remiss not to acknowledge the challenges we've had over the last 12 months. And I recognise that we're not fully out of the woods on that. Many businesses are closed, and I think most businesses are in some way impacted by the pandemic. But I also see a huge willingness every day from businesses to tackle this issue. And in the year that the UK is currently the G7 president, and the G7 presidency has a strong sustainability and climate theme running through it like a stick of rock as we all head down to Cornwall in June, and then followed by the COP26, the Global Climate Summit, the United Nations International Climate Summit in Glasgow on the 1st of November in 33 weeks' time. This is a historic opportunity. And my objective as business champion for the UK over the next 33 weeks is to build a real momentum in activity, each of us every day taking small steps, big decisions to solve that climate crisis, and building that up to a crescendo to lead by example and give our global leaders the confidence to make bold and ambitious pledges that are going to be necessary to save our climate, on the back of knowing that the business community is a leader, not a follower in that space. Geopolitically, we could not be better positioned. And the election of President Biden and the march immediately of the United States back into the Paris Accords has electrified the potential of what we can do this year. Similarly, China is round the table, is on the playing field, has an existing target to become net zero. And I believe there is every prospect of them. You know, that's one of the other world's biggest emitters of setting their own ambitious target. The UK, as I think you will know, was one of the first countries in the world to bake a 2050 net zero target into law. That's for the whole of the United Kingdom. And we have a very ambitious target to reduce our own CO2 emissions by 68% by 2030 over the next 8 or so years. That's baselined to the 1990 levels. So the UK has a number of key roles. The biggest is as the chair of these really important global engagements in setting the agenda and in leading by example. And that's where all of us can be part of that leading by example. You know that the maths are that the UK itself is about 2% of global emissions. And so if we're going to play with the 98%, the best way of leveraging that is by using the UK as an exemplar of what government action can do. But secondly, and very excitingly and very pertinent to the group that the IPPR have gathered here today, is our role as a science and research and technology leader. Because the best and the most exciting and the most productive way of tackling the climate crisis is by harnessing new technologies and new innovation and then deploying those at scale. Because that reduces the cost of making the change that we all need to make. It allows consumers to take control of their own lives, to have the information to make the changes that they want to make, and allows us all to move that much faster and quicker together. So I'm very passionate about the UK's role in technology, in deploying smart networks, in smart devices, and in using the very best processes. At its heart, it sounds quite dry, but at its heart, tackling the climate is a resource optimization decision. It's about making the very best use of the world's scarce resources to create the best uses. And it's about data. And sometimes it's about access to that data. And once that data exists, those data sets that we've measured things that we never used to measure before. And that was one of the sources of the externality that's created the climate crisis. Once we're able to measure those, to bring them for the first time away from abstraction into something that's measurable, then we can use the ferocious problem-solving power of business that's put food on the table, that's extended our lifespans, that's given us a quality of life that people know and love and are familiar with. We can use that problem-solving power of business to tackle this issue in much the same way as it has tackled the issue of the global pandemic, and come up in record time with a solution with a vaccine. I always love, and I'll finish on this because I just think it's an inspirational point, and then we can turn to Scott and others to hear about some of the solutions that are already out there. But I remember the quote from, I'm not sure I do remember, I wasn't born, but I love the quote from JFK, from Kennedy, about going to the moon. And he delivered a speech in 1962 when he talked very passionately about, we go to the moon not because it is easy, but because it is hard. And at the moment he gave that speech, there was not a clear path. The number of science and space milestones to get to the moon did not exist. There was a degree of ambition and aspiration and some necessity when that speech was given. But it was only 8 years later that man first landed on the moon, and that those challenges, those scientific, technology, behavioral and business challenges had been solved. And so I think that's where we are today. I think that we have all of the tools to solve this crisis at our disposal. There is an enormous positivity from the conversations I have with business every day. British businesses are leading the world in terms of their pledging and their ambition on climate. And I'm looking forward to hearing from today's conversation, not just about the work that's already going on, but also what government can do, accepting that government's only one actor in this, but what can government do to help aid and abet and accelerate those technologies? And that's why today's conversation that you've brought us all together is so apposite, and I'm so pleased to be here. Thanks very much, Andrew. You set the scene really well there in the context in the run up to COP, and in some respects laid down the gauntlet for Scott now to tell us all what the solutions are. And I'll hand over to Scott, who's hopefully going to do maybe not all the solutions, but at least tell us a little bit about the part of that. Over to you, Scott.
Thanks, Luke, and a fantastic introduction, Andrew, and great ambition and challenge for all of us in the community. And as a British company, Vodafone really wants to play our full part in helping the UK government achieve its net zero by 2050 ambition. Last November, we announced that we'll reduce the company's total global carbon emissions to net zero by 2040. By 2030, we'll eliminate all carbon emissions from our own activities, from the energy we purchase and use, and we'll halve our carbon emissions from Scope 3 sources, which is 10 years ahead of the targets we originally set. And some of that comes from the accelerating ambition that I think our leaders are showing across the government. It's not all about the future. Much of what we're doing is very much about the here and now. By July this year, we will have we'll be powering all of our UK network from 100% renewable electricity. We'll reuse, resell and recycle 100% of our redundant network equipment. And we've introduced new environmental criteria when selecting suppliers and partners that we work with within our organisation to encourage our supply chain to take net zero seriously. And we've been deploying many of our technology capabilities to help us achieve these goals and really learn and be able to share that with our customer base. One technology that I think is really important for all organizations in achieving net zero is the Internet of Things. Andrew said it really well. It's about resource optimization and data. And what the Internet of Things allows us to do is to connect everything, to get access to data, to get access to information, and then optimize processes and the usage of those resources in an automated fashion. Within our own environment, we're using the Internet of Things to connect to all of our radio base stations to measure our electricity consumption, our heating, the data consumption that we have within those radio base stations, and adjusting all of the technologies in each base station to optimize our electricity consumption and help reduce our greenhouse gas emissions. Really simple things, being able to make sure the temperature is set exactly right for the temperature of the day, to turn off sectors on our mobile network when there's no data traffic leveraging those. The Internet of Things gives us that power by automating and giving us access to the data. It even allows us to do innovative things. For instance, we're deploying lithium-ion batteries to our radio base stations that allow us to run on battery power rather than the grid for longer periods of the day to offload our usage and ensure that we have resilient systems as well as efficient systems. Vodafone is one of the leading IoT players in the world. We have one of the largest platforms globally, more than 100 million devices connected to our Internet of Things platform. And over a third of those are helping our customers reduce their emissions through a whole range of applications, everything from fleet management technology, helping businesses understand how their fleet's performing, their usage, smart metering, both in the UK and in many other markets, helping both consumers and businesses understand their energy consumption, smart manufacturing, optimizing the way that factories work. And this is one of the early applications of 5G technology. We're seeing some really exciting projects with Ford and Centrica in the UK looking to use 5G smart manufacturing to optimize their energy consumption in the manufacturing process. And one that we really believe in is creating digital buildings and helping with transport and logistics. Connecting and digitizing a building really creates a real opportunity for businesses to understand their energy consumption and drive down their emissions. We ran a recent report across all of our Vodafone footprint, and we were able to demonstrate that using IoT technologies and similar technologies, companies can deliver a 5 to 10% emissions saving on all of their buildings. To kind of put that in context, if we connected up and digitized all of the public sector buildings in the UK, we could reduce carbon emissions by 15% for the public sector and save the taxpayer up to £380 million per year. So leveraging IoT technology and smart buildings is a very effective way for us to help businesses and help the public sector drive down energy emissions. It's also about helping the environment as a whole. We've been working with DEFRA to investigate how IoT technology can help monitor tree growth and support research in the role of trees in tackling climate change. Again, using the power of the data collection and optimization of resources that IoT really brings as a technology set. Andrew challenges to say, could the government play a role? And I think absolutely the government can play a critical role in helping businesses decarbonize and achieve net zero targets. Encouraging investment in charging infrastructure for electric fleets, for instance, to encourage businesses to move more quickly to electronic vehicles for their fleets. Incentivizing on-site and off-site renewable energy generation and helping build wind, water and solar projects. We're currently building a solar farm next to one of our largest data centers in the UK to again improve our carbon emissions and our footprint. And I think also helping the public sector and the government being a leading use case in the adoption of these technologies in 5G and IoT, and really leading the way to show businesses that it's not just about achieving net zero, but doing it in a commercially effective way that can actually help businesses free up resources and ultimately cash to help them be a more optimal business. So I think as a community, there's a lot we can do together. There's some fantastic technology to help people, but we need to work together as a set of industries to accelerate our ambitions.
Fantastic. Thanks very much, Scott, for setting that out. And I've got a couple of questions off the back of some of the things you said, but keen to come to our other speakers. And we've also got a few questions coming in, a couple directed at Andrew, asking in particular around the potential for digital innovation around road pricing and also learning lessons from COVID. And also a question that I think I'll probably come to all speakers for at some point, asking about where this is being done well around the world. But next up, I'm going to come to Katerina, who is Head of Climate Policy at Green Alliance. Katerina.
Great. Thank you, Luke, and thanks a lot for the invitation. And for those of you who are not familiar with Green Alliance, we are an independent think tank and charity focused on achieving ambitious leadership for the environment. And when it comes to digital technology, we think it could be transformational for the environmental agenda. I think already over the recent months, we've seen examples such as broadband, proving that new ways of working could be adopted at large scale. Obviously, it remains to be seen how much of this will stick, but in a way they could be reducing demand for travel going forward. Digital platforms have enabled the redistribution of food supplies from the hospitality sector, reducing food waste. And online apps have also supported on-demand transport, ensuring therefore the travel options will be made targeted for essential workers while reducing the need for limiting unnecessary journeys. And these are obviously just few examples of what's possible. Much more, in fact, is possible, as we've also highlighted with Green Alliance and business and innovation organizations that were involved in our tech task force over the past couple of years. When we think about what is needed to tackle the climate crisis, we need to reduce our use of resources, make more efficient use of energy, switch to clean technologies, and restore the natural environment. And digital technology will be instrumental in delivering on all of these aspects. And crucially, it won't only enable businesses to perform better from an environmental perspective, it also brings economic benefits by reducing costs to businesses from thanks to better use of energy and resources, improving productivity, and enabling the development also of new products and services, which will keep UK businesses competitive as global economies decarbonize. The UK is well placed, I think, to lead on this agenda. And as sort of Andrew also emphasized, the UK should be showcasing, I think, what's possible and really where can we push this agenda forward. Because in a way, it builds on on a thriving tech scene. It already has important digitalization initiatives underway, which have helped to develop some of the expertise that is required in this area. And it also has the necessary legislative and institutional frameworks that set the direction of travel for green economy, including the Climate Change Committee, the legal net zero emissions targets, and the forthcoming Environment Act. However, one thing that we've emphasized, I think, also as part of our investigation with the Tech Task Force, is that the uptake of smart low carbon technologies is still somewhat limited, and this is in part because of what has so far been a disjointed approach to digitalization and net zero. For example, some of the leading initiatives to increase digital adoption, such as Made Smarter or the construction sector deal, they have not realized the full potential as we think of solutions to help decarbonization. So I think much more was possible in that context, and we hope that will be built on going forward. And on the other hand, also environmental policy, we think, is not necessarily making the most of digital solutions. For example, there's been sort of underinvestment in the data and digital systems needed to support the green economy. And there are examples of also of policy which is still relying on outdated systems. And it therefore is disincentivizing business innovation and investment in new solutions. And what is crucial is that now, as we reemerge, or respond at least to the impacts of the pandemic, businesses will need all the help they can get to recover. And it's vital, therefore, that net zero and digitalization are seen as linked priorities to gear up the business community to face the new realities that will shape the future and put them on the best footing also to compete internationally. And therefore, with the Tech Task Force, we identified 5 key areas where we see government playing a role in enabling this wave of innovation and business investment. And I'll discuss these briefly. Obviously, I'm happy to pick up on any of them as part of the discussion. But the first one is to make sure that government joins up the digitalization and net zero agenda as part of its various strategies. I think it was very positive already with the Energy White Paper to see that government has set the ambition to move to a smarter, cleaner, more flexible energy system. And that's obviously very positive that it's joining up, obviously, the decarbonization and leveraging digital technologies to move to that system. But there's a number of other strategies we're expecting in the coming months that will be relevant to net zero and to digital, including the transport decarbonization plan, the heat and building strategy, the digital strategy. And it's really vital that those give a sort of a clear direction of travel for businesses to see these as joint priorities. The second point is about government investing and enabling the strategic use of data to promote a green economy. Data has become obviously a critical component of infrastructure, and government should build on the work that is already underway with the Energy Data Task Force to promote the strategic use of data across other high-emitting sectors, including transport, manufacturing, and land use. The third recommendation is around strengthening digital skills and capabilities so that businesses and communities across the country can benefit from smart low-carbon solutions. And this should include a targeted business support program, which should be joining up digitalization, so digital adoption, with the explicit prioritization of low carbon and resource efficiency. And it should also be complemented by a skills program that also jointly supports growth in clean industries and digitalization. The fourth recommendation highlights the need to bring people along in the transition by addressing privacy and safety concerns and ensuring the data is used for the public goods, which includes also ensuring that solutions are developed to meet the needs of different groups and communities within across the country, making sure that we don't leave people behind as we move and sort of develop these new solutions. And then the final point, which I think picks up also on some of the points that Scott was making, is about making sure that smart devices and data we're also addressing the footprint that comes with these solutions. So therefore, making sure that they're not, as they sort of are taken up across different sectors, they do not contribute to further environmental degradation. But I'll pause here, and I'm happy, obviously, to discuss any of this, and I look forward to the Q&A session.
Fantastic. Thanks very much, Katerina. It was really comprehensive as well. Last but not least, I'm going to hand over to Prad, who's going to give his views before we go to audience questions. And we've already got a few coming in, as I said. But over to you, Prad.
Thank you, Luke. Today, I'm the Managing Director for Energy and Sustainability Services at Mighty. For those of you are not aware, Mighty is one of the leading facilities management companies. We have 77,000 employees, and we participate in keeping the country running in these difficult times. A large amount of our employees are in the front line, keeping our hospitals, railway stations, airports, schools, offices running where they need to be. So today I'm going to talk about the digital impact in non-residential buildings and facilities management. Of course, digitization can impact energy systems, transport, improve even our biodiversity, as Scott was saying, with monitoring the growth of plants. So it has pervasive uses, but I thought I'd focus on the area of non-residential buildings. It's quite surprising to know that about 30% of the energy used in an average commercial building is wasted. If you assume that half of that is coming from fossil fuel sources, then that represents a 15% impact in emissions footprint reduction just by addressing that waste. Now, using the building blocks of digitization, whether it's mobile devices, analytics, IoT sensors, cloud-hosted systems, all of that allows us to really address this waste in buildings. And why IoT and digitization of buildings, non-residential buildings, is particularly important is because that's one sector that has kind of flatlined in terms of its energy efficiency per square meter, but also 75% of the buildings that are going to be there at that 2050, when we'll all be net zero or before, are already built, which means that using IoT sensors, which are low cost, non-intrusive, are a great opportunity for us to be able to retrofit old buildings in a non-intrusive way. And as Andrew was saying, the first step is to use all this sensing and measurement technology to make visible that footprint and that baseline of what the impact of running a non-residential residential building is. And what we have found is that by providing that visibility, owners of buildings are able to identify really quickly opportunities for potential interventions and reductions once they have that data and visibility at their disposal. Having all those sensors implemented in our buildings and digitizing buildings also allows users now expect an app for everything. So suddenly you're able to provide power to users of these non-residential buildings to impact their work environments and to also visualize the environmental impact of their building, which provides another tool to engage them in that journey, because behavior change and everybody getting on this effort to reduce the carbon footprint of a building is quite important. And so that can help. And not only that, we can also provide the same power to the operators of the building. So in a recent example for one of our retail customers, we provided the store manager with a dashboard and set up a leaderboard across the country for stores. So each of the store managers were competing with each other to produce a lesser energy usage within their stores. So you can have operators also using the same technology and benefit. And once you have all these systems and workspaces all connected up, what it allows us to do is also reduce the amount of local intervention and connect to these systems remotely. And when systems are not operating in their parameters or using more energy than was modeled or expected, you can bring the expert more quickly to the problem. You can cut down on a journey required to visit that building, and quite a lot of these problems can be fixed remotely. And when the problems are not able to fix remotely, you can use this 5th generation or even 4th generation networks, frankly, to provide augmented communication, artificial reality, and the data and communication between the remote specialist and an on-site not so expert person to solve the problem more quickly. So I think there is a tremendous opportunity. And when we all think about, oh, this is getting connected and that is connected, I think some of us might be thinking about what are the impacts to cybersecurity. Now, of course, cybersecurity is a big risk in this digital and connected work, and one that must be addressed and mitigated. But technology vendors are implementing all the cybersecure principles and methods and technologies that are used to expect in running our financial transactions, even in these automation technologies. So we should be quite confident in the use of these IoT technologies. So in terms of what we can really do, I think I'd share 3 things. Firstly, we must share success stories. MIT has its own goal of achieving net zero in our operational emissions by 2025 and across our entire supply chain by 2035. We make the effort to reach out, be transparent about the actions we have taken, share our learnings, what has worked and what has not worked in the area of fleet, in the area of buildings, in the area of waste reduction. And our customers are doing the same. For a bank, we recently, over the last 8 years, we've been able to save 180,000 tons of CO2 and returned almost 50 million in savings in doing that. With Vodafone, we've also, they have also published the achievements they have made in using of technology across their estate, and Scott talked about that. So we really need to share these success stories, lead by example, as Andrew was saying. Secondly, I think technologists and engineers are a little guilty of leading with the technical case. I think the time has come, sustainability solutions needn't cost the earth. They really have a strong business case. In many cases, payback periods under 2 years. And when the government is going to extend its incentive schemes for heat decarbonization, that's an area that typically takes 6 to 8 years. But with some effort there, even those can be under 5 years. So we must lead with the business case towards the decision makers, the boards, the C-suite executives, who might not be really aware that reducing carbon is actually good for the bottom line. So we must seize this opportunity and momentum we have post the COVID pandemic and to drive that conversation and to get monies allocated towards this. And thirdly, I really believe that digitization in the facilities management and construction sector has been slow. But that's also an opportunity for the UK economy and all the STEM experience. And we can really, again, lead by example in this area. And by nature, digital is remote, can be remote. So we really can provide those services from within the UK to broad parts of the built environment across the world. And I really believe that we can encourage British businesses, British technology, and British engineering to provide those services across the world. So over to you, Luke. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thanks very much, Prad. And actually, one of your points around sharing success stories links really well with one of the questions that's been asked. So I'm gonna jump straight to the audience Q&A, because we don't have loads of time, and I'm keen to get some of those questions answered and get the discussion going. The first is probably more directed at Prad and Scott, but obviously Katerina and Andrew, if you want to answer this question, please do feel free. The second, which I'll take them together, probably more for Katerina and Andrew. So the first around the success stories really is a question from an attendee about where this is being done around the world, where it's being done well around the world. So which countries, are there any particular examples of countries where smart tech and digital innovation is being used intelligently to deliver net zero that the UK could particularly learn from? Any kind of success stories from elsewhere or case studies that you know of? And that's primarily for Prad and Scott. The second one is around Katerina's point about the need to join up digital and net zero strategies. So the question is, said the government's decision to abandon industrial strategy, is that a concern and a barrier to doing that? So for those that don't know, recently there's certainly been a shift in emphasis in the government's language around the use of industrial strategy to the successor document around Plan for Growth, but the Industrial Strategy Council was disbanded. So can the an industrial strategy delivered by government help join up those agendas, and are those developments a concern? I'll come to Prad first, but do feel free to answer either of those questions, but primarily on the questions around international examples, and then I'll come to Scott.
Yeah, I think there's a lot to learn from international examples for sure. I think the United States conducts a lot of trials of technologies, and there are a lot of papers that one can download and experience. But listen, I think in our country itself, there are several examples that we can pick up and learn from, and several implementations where the material is quite freely available. Let me give you an example. So the Better Buildings Partnership has created an effort to provide net zero pathways. Now all the companies are publishing those pathways, and you can share in that experience, without involving any extensive and expensive resource. So there's quite a lot of material out there. I think the time now is to take that action, take those ideas to the boards, and get the funding to get your projects going.
Thanks, Prad. Scott.
Yeah, I guess to build on that, in terms of IoT adoption, smart buildings, we're seeing some good examples in the UK, many in Europe. Countries like Germany and Austria have good case studies. But probably the continent that's doing the best is Asia, across Japan, South Korea, China, investing in smart cities and smart technology to deliver benefits. Whether that translates into an overall net zero plan for the country, I think is some way off to be seen, but the usage of the technology to drive down carbon emissions is very strong. There's also a linkage to the country's approach to retiring older or legacy technologies. One of in the technology sector, one of the biggest challenges in reducing emissions is actually removing old technology as much as using new technology to help you. And as a country, the UK could go a little bit faster in retiring legacy technologies. In the mobile industry, we still use 2G, 3G, as well as 4G and 5G. There are many countries around the world who have retired 2G and 3G technologies, and therefore using much more modern technology, which consumes less energy, but also enables a new set of applications. And I think we could speed up there. The same is true in the fixed infrastructure. Our optical fiber footprint is not as good as some of the Asian countries I mentioned, still too much reliance on old copper technologies, which consume large amounts of energy and are not delivering value. So when we look at industry sectors, you need to look at new technology adoption as well as old technology retirement as part of your overall net zero story.
Thanks very much.
If I can, yeah, you asked for example, the questioner asked for some examples. There are two really practical examples in the domain, for example, of smart buildings, residential and commercial. One is the move to real-time electricity pricing. So the move, just as in any other market, from 30-minute intervals to 30-second intervals is a power function in terms of the efficiency. And that's something that companies, some of the new energy providers in the UK are doing right now. I think it's been more prevalent in the commercial space, but you as a residential or a small business user can do that today. Another one is water leakage. I mean, this is kind of where old tech meets new tech. Looking at the leakage in water pipes, there's quite a lot of leakage in water systems. You can fit a very simple Internet of Things sensor that detects temperature gradients in water pipes. Connect that to your Wi-Fi and immediately detect water leakages. So it's a win-win. It's very prime time ready technology, but it could make a big difference if you think about all of the energy cycle that's used to clean new water. If you don't have to waste 6 or 7% because of leakage in the grid, that's a no regrets change that you can make overnight. And then I agree with Scott, actually. I think it's as much about, and this is one of the roles for government, it's sort of how you sweep up the back of the peloton, as I call it, with regulation. So the best way is to, use carrots, get people to adopt technology as quickly as they can. Sometimes the government can pump prime the adoption of technology, as it did with wind a generation ago. But there is also a role at the back end, a bit like we've done now with internal combustion engines, to sort of set out a trajectory and say, at this point in time, you need to have got with this program. And it would be good to see some of that same initiative with smart buildings over time as well.
Thanks very much, Andrew. I just wanted to come back to the question as well around industrial strategy and whether you would, just that point that Katerina and the questioners asked about joining up net zero and digital strategy, and whether a kind of an overarching industrial strategy is necessary to deliver that, and whether you think anything of substance has changed over the past few months in terms of the government's approach to industrial strategy.
No, I think with the best will in the world, this is my personal take, it's a bit semantic. I mean, of course, the government is committed to an industrial strategy in the verb sense of setting out what is the strategy for this country, how are we going to compete, what are we successful at, and what do we need to be more successful at, and then underpinning that with both, a fiscal, a support stimuli where needed, research and development pipeline, the right skills and education and workforce strategies, and supporting the overall fiscal and business environment. So if you think about industrial strategy as a sort of a set of verbs, then the government is clearly doing that, and it's put the Prime Minister's put his green 10-point plan at the absolute heart of that. And every week, to be honest, there's another announcement about a new carbon capture storage, green mobility, a bus strategy today that's got sustainability at the heart of that, versus a particular static set of documents, which I guess is what people were referring to with quotes, the industrial strategy. So I mean, it's not entirely semantic, don't get me wrong, but the government has a very clear set of purposes and interventions. Could always do more, but the constraining factor is often how quickly we can marshal all of our endeavors and make sure that we hear, what's working really well. I mean, my background was in business. I was in business like Scott and Pandit for 27 years. So for me, it's like, what's working well? Let's do more of that, right? Let's try and propagate that, scale that more quickly, and then go back and look at the other interventions that we should make.
Thanks very much. Katerina, just, on that question on industrial strategy and joining up those strategies, just wondered whether you had anything to add. I also just wanted to kind of raise another question as well that's coming, just around skills shortages and whether skills shortages have thus far, in your view, had any impact on innovations, and if so, what are the shortages? I'll also come to other speakers on that particular question as well. Katerina.
Yeah, I think on the point of industrial strategy, we do see industrial strategy as a vital piece of the puzzle. I think in making sure that we are realigning the economy towards net zero, and I think it's really sort of highlighting and recognizing the role of government in addressing the barriers. I think it's, in many cases, innovators and businesses that are wanting to lead on the green agenda, I think, are facing. And I think on that, therefore, it would be vital as we go forward that government still sort of uses a whole suite of measures that can foster green innovation and ensure that technologies are taken up at scale then across the economy, because I think that's one of the vital barriers. And I think also, again, sort of building on one of the points that Andrew made, the 10-point plan, I think, identifies some of the areas that government is keen to advance on this. We think that there's much more that also needs to happen across the wider sector, because I think there's a lot of opportunities for low carbon and resource efficient industries across sort of the energy efficiency for buildings, for low carbon transport, for resource efficient manufacturing. So I think all of those are opportunities that an industrial strategy and sort of a comprehensive policy package would enable to scale up in the near term and promoting therefore economic recovery and a wide range of co-benefits across the country. On the issue of skills, that is often sort of, I think, identified as one of the barriers to adoption of digital technology. I would join up the skills point with the low carbon, the need to sort of also invest in skills for low carbon industries. So I would encourage, I think, as we are joining up strategies, to also join up the upskilling and reskilling programs so that they prepare the workforce for low carbon industries, as well as sort of build up the digital capabilities, because it's true that sort of evidence shows that digital skills will be required across a whole range of sectors, and therefore making sure that workers are empowered and sort of enabled to enter those sectors, I think, would be vital.
Thanks very much. I will come to others on the skills question if you'd like to add, but there's two kind of really interesting questions in the chat that I think are worth addressing. One in particular, which I think relates really closely to the work of IPPR around the net zero transition. And so someone's asked, they've said the Internet of Things will undoubtedly contribute to achieving net zero, but will also be a powerful method of data capture. Is there a way to share the financial gain from this data in a fair way, perhaps targeting communities and individuals most disadvantaged by the shift to net zero? And I think that also speaks to a broader question about net zero. And clearly there are lots of benefits, but there are some costs, and we need to make sure that both the costs are fairly distributed as well as the opportunities. So I'd be really interested in the speaker's point of view on the way in which digital innovation can help achieve that on the wider agenda, or certainly impact on the wider agenda around fairly sharing the costs and the benefits of the transition. And then secondly, this is quite a big question as well, but I think it's going to become more and more part of the debate, and indeed is linked very much to the kind of fairness question, which is, as Andrew mentioned, with the phase out of petrol and diesel vehicles by 2030, one of the big things that I'm sure will be occupying Treasury officials now is the substantial amount of revenue that they get through fuel duty and taxation. And therefore, one of the things crucially that we'll need to think about is the role of road pricing. And I'd be interested to know what people think about Stephen Stewart's question. He refers to the bus strategy released today, but asked in particular what plans the government might have to reinforce the objective around decarbonising transport by using new technology to put in place a road pricing regime in the UK. I suppose from the other speakers' perspectives, it might be less about what plans the government has, but whether digital technology is ready for that for the speed of rollout we might need to introduce road pricing. So questions there on fairness, in particular skills, if you want to pick up that as well, but also the question around road pricing. And I might come to Scott first, then Prad, and then back to Andrew, and then Katerina.
Sure, let me start with the last question first. Yes, the technology is available today, and actually there's some very good trials underway in the UK, in the West Midlands, building smart road infrastructure for measuring traffic flow and using it for smart repairs and a range of other elements. And with the data that can be used to link to a number of user journeys and the prices that they would pay. And it exists in many countries around the world as a mechanism to ensure the cost of the road system is borne by the people who use it the most. I think in your first question on the fairness or rebalancing the people most disadvantaged by net zero, I think for all businesses, net zero delivers resource efficiencies that they have to choose what to do with and how best to reutilize that. I think working in telecommunications and having just lived through COVID for the last year and a little bit, we learned very quickly that it was brilliant that our networks were working, but we needed to ensure that everyone had access to those in a fair way. And as an industry, I think we did a good job of supporting health workers, giving them free data, distributing SIMs and connectivity to schools to enable disadvantaged students who didn't have laptops to be able to connect and get access to digital tools. And I think all businesses in the future will find their employees putting pressure on them to do the right thing for society and invest not just in profits, but in how we support all of society. And all businesses should do the same as they identify operational efficiencies. They need to balance out how they redeploy those resources to balance out both profit growth as well as supporting all of society.
Thanks very much, Scott. Brad?
Yeah, I'll just make a point about the skills. I think it's a tremendous opportunity to encourage secondary school students and particularly universities on STEM skills. I think young adults and emerging professionals are really excited about the opportunity, and they should be, and there's lots to do. And if we are able to make these trainings available, it's another area where we can also emerge globally as a player in this area.
Thanks very much. Andrew?
Yeah, look, this is so exciting. I mean, if you think about what we're trying to do as a society, I mean, we're taking effectively a society that's built on 2,000 years of human progress around carbon, from when we first started burning wood and coal that we found on the foreshore. And in the space of a handful of decades to completely reinvent that basic underpinning of society. I don't think there's ever been a more exciting time to potentially be a young person contemplating their future and looking at all of the different skill sets that we're going to need, from environmental surveyors, that means we can build the buildings and plan the towns that are going to be carbon sustainable, to technologists who are going to use all of these wonderful new developments connecting the Internet of Things to machine learning and quantum computing to try and drive those resource algorithms. So it's an incredibly important time. It's really important that we get quickly our hands around the sort of new skills and jobs and opportunities. Like any technology shift, this can be enormously democratizing. So things like giving people the power in their hand can take away the unequal force of business and government and actually make this a real force for good. Now, that's a set of positive choices that we have to make, and people like the IPPR will be brilliant in advocacy for, but it certainly holds the seeds of that. As we know today, a lot of the costs of energy utilization are quite regressive. It's a bigger part of low-income households than it is the further up the income deciles you go. So anything that can help reduce energy costs, for example, could be a really important part of the fairness and the levelling up agenda. And then I'd make one final point. I'd make common cause with Scott, for example, about the liberating power of high bandwidth networks. Because as we think about how we build back greener, for example, but we also think about the workplace of the future, and we think about the access to those high value jobs, sometimes from the female participation, from mothers, from some of the more vulnerable communities. That ability for the first time to potentially work flexibly and locate flexibly, again, could be a really important part of the fairness agenda. So I'm sure we'll hear more from the IPPR on those sort of things, but there are lots and lots of opportunities if we embrace these new technologies.
Thanks very much, Andrew. Katerina?
Yeah, so I think starting from the point on transport, I think the one thing that I would emphasize there is that technology will play a role across a number of areas, and I would emphasize also the need for a comprehensive package of interventions. So it's not just looking at road pricing as a way of sort of driving consumer behavior, but it's using the transport data sort of for using more strategically the transport data by bringing together data from different operators, identifying how can you get people to move to sort of more multimodal way of transport, so that people, as they are sort of incentivizing to reduce the miles they drive, they also are provided with the alternative. And I think on that is also therefore not only more strategic use of data, but also identifying, recognizing that other forms of investments are required. So investment in public transport, investment in infrastructure for walking and cycling. So all of those areas also need to be provided as part of a comprehensive package that will allow people to move to low carbon alternatives. And I think this then builds sort of links to the fairness questions, is identifying what are the set of interventions that are needed for people to benefit and sort of make use of these new solutions. So making sure that the data that people might share is also then used to tailor solutions to different needs, not necessarily, and sort of therefore identifying how can everyone ultimately benefit from these, having also greater insight into what the benefits are and making sure that those are distributed evenly across society. And I think having also greater say for the public in how the data is utilized. I think there's some very exciting examples of cities that are looking into this, sort of sharing more of their data and getting more of an input from the public as with the kind of services they're developing. And I think this could also be a way to democratize and ensure greater fairness as these technologies are taken up.
Fantastic, thanks very much. I'm very conscious of time, so I'm going to attempt to have another couple of questions answered and get your concluding thoughts all into the last 30 seconds. And I will come to Prad first, back to Katerina, then Andrew, and then leave the final word to Scott in doing that. So there's just a couple of ones I just wanted to pick up in particular. One was that's been addressed to Andrew in particular, which is around the successful collaboration between academia and industry, and the idea that that successful collaboration brought about the AstraZeneca vaccine. What are the collaborations like that might help us deliver for net zero? And of course, if anyone else wants to address that, that would be great as well. And then finally, there's just one question around what people perceive to be the risks around increasing the use of smart technology, and if so, how we might mitigate them. Prad, if you feel like you've got time in your 30 seconds, there is a particular questions there for you, I think, about how we encourage the managers of our offices to follow your lead and offer detailed and easily accessible environmental performance data. But I suspect you may not have time in 30 seconds to do that, so maybe we'll ask our questioner to follow up with us afterwards. I've already forgotten what order I said I was going to do, but I'll come to Prad. I think it was Katerina, Andrew, and then Scott. Prad, and any concluding thoughts?
Yeah, I think the technologies that can help and create benefits exist today, the digital technologies, and the time is now to act at pace with a sense of urgency and to lead with business cases within our companies, and even in the government department, act on fact, collect the data, use these technologies to collect that data and present it in a way that becomes actionable, and let's get on with it. So it was very interesting to hear everyone's comments, and I'm looking forward. This is an opportunity of a generation, and we should really feel all excited about it and positive.
Thanks very much. Katerina.
Yeah, thank you. So I think on the point of risk from digital technology, I think we have to be mindful, obviously, of making sure that we bring people and different communities along with us. I think that would be vital to make sure that as part of also the low carbon transition, that we do have a successful transition with the public's buy-in. And I think the other risk that we need to address is making sure that digital technology is firmly embedded in a world that is moving towards net zero. So really joining up, I think reiterating my point about joining up those two agendas. And I think also there's a very interesting point about the sort of the COVID innovation, vaccine innovation race. I think then there again, there's something that can be learned and that can be translated across green innovation and smart green innovation, because there it was really a range of different policy levers that government has used to achieve that successful innovation in such a short period of time.
Thank you. Andrew.
Well, look, the question about academia and industry, I think, is really pertinent. I mean, that is the answer to how we solve this. There are lots of really positive antecedents in that space. As you know, the government is doubling over the next few years the already significant amount of money that's going on science and research through something called the UK Research and Innovation. I hope that much of that money, and I believe that much of that, will flow to the sort of technologies that are capable of solving the climate crisis. And one reason for that is that that's a key objective of Dame Otterline, who chairs that funding body. It's allocating currently £9 billion a year, so that's not trivial. And that's going to increase to 22 billion over the next few years. And I hope the majority of that goes to innovation rather than necessarily the sort of basic science, which is already, I think, well covered. Every catapult, the government has lots of interventions, things like the satellite. I mean, something that's sort of pertinent, but not directly in the firing line. You know, the UK satellite catapult has got a big work stream about Earth sensing. And Earth sensing is, again, giving us the data to try and analyze and solve some of these problems. Tomorrow, I'm meeting with the Jet Zero Council, which has academics represented on it, as well as the industry. So it's a proper, problem-solving round table that's designed to come up with some very actionable outcomes. And I'm happy, and my role is to engage with precisely those organizations, whether they're academia, or early stage innovators, founders, entrepreneurs, right up to the very largest businesses like Scott's, in order to help us move the whole thing forward at the same time, but with the momentum of these really, really important 33 weeks as we go into that climate summit. There's no law of gravity that says business has to do everything by the 1st of November, but there is absolutely the imperative for us all to do something in that run up to the global climate summit.
Thanks very much, Andrew. A kind of important call to action there. Scott.
But just to finish off, I think there's a lot of technology that can help all businesses with their net zero ambitions. But probably the most important thing they can do is make energy consumption visible in their business and make it a key decision criteria for everything they do. Really simple step. We added energy usage to all of our business cases. So not just as looking at CapEx and OpEx and customer impact, we started to look at energy consumption and the things that we could do to improve that. And suddenly the entire organization started to focus on how we could drive down energy consumption and bring innovative ideas to the way that we could achieve our net zero ambitions. And I'd encourage all businesses to use smart technology to empower their employees to understand the energy consumption and the way they can help their business meet those goals.
Brilliant. Thanks very much, Scott. So we're slightly over time because of my bad chairing, but thank you. It just leaves me to say thank you very much to all of our speakers, to Andrew, to Brad, to Katerina, and to Scott for their really interesting contributions. Thank you to all of our attendees who've taken the time to attend and watch today, and also for those that put their questions. And sorry we didn't manage to get through to all of them. IPPR's work and the work in the Environmental Justice Commission will continue throughout this year in the run-up to COP. And finally, thank you to Vodafone for their support for this event. But enjoy the rest of your Monday and the rest of the week. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.